Hello, in this video of the quick take of the China Global South project, I'm going to give you my quick take on one of the news that we've learned during this week. And this quick take is going to allow us to understand the dynamic behind that news that we've learned and the decision that has been taken by China. So, what we've learned this week is quite interesting to see. We've learned that China is proposing $1 billion to revamp the Tanzania Zambia railway project. That's called the TAZARA in short. Um, we've received quite a number of questions because we've been telling you for the last few months that China has moved away from big infrastructure projects in Africa. China is not doing that anymore. China has changed the dynamic of China engagement in Africa. No big billion, no huge billion project in Africa anymore. We even talked about the fact that Kenyan President William Ruto went to China last year in October, searching and hoping to find $1 billion from China to continue the Kenya SGR that stopped in Nairobi. We say that China is not doing that anymore. So, but we have in this case where China is coming and proposing $1 billion to revamp and modernize the Tazara railway. So, what's really happening here and how to understand the dynamic behind this China decision. So, in this quick take, I'm going to allow you to quite understand why China is making that decision, what dynamic is taking, and how does it fit with the small and beautiful that we've been talking about in China engagement in Africa. So, first of all, you kind of need to understand the context of what we are talking about here. So, here you have on the screen what we call the Tazara Railway. It starts here in Zambia, and in cross Zambia, it goes to the port of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. It's a railway that connects Zambia in the Copper Belt up to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. It was built in 1975, if my memory serves correct. It was built as an aid project by China. It was built by China and financed by China to help connect those two countries, to help connect the interland of Zambia to the Indian coast on the Indian Ocean. Since then, the Tazara Railway is now, let's say, 49 years almost. But since then, it's been almost, crumbling and dying. It's not up to shape anymore, but it's a very important railway. So, why China is deciding to invest in that specific project and to put that much money, and in which context it's doing that? Because it's quite interesting to understand the context and to understand why China is moving away from what we've been telling you, the smart and is beautiful, and it's not even moving away, but why China is doing what it does. So you have to understand, for that you have to understand this here. Here you have the map of the Lobito corridor, the what's now controlled by the Trafigura that leads the consortium called the Lobito Atlantic Railway. Since 2022, they won the bit of the concession, and they're gonna have they signed the deal in December last year, and they're gonna have the control of that railway up to 30 years. And they are backed by the US and the European Union. So the Lobito Atlantic Railway is supported by the US and the EU as an effort for them to counter China's influence in the region, because we know that the US has been moving forward in a way to find alternative supply route and supply chain and access to critical minerals that are produced in DRC and in Zambia. So, by supporting that railway, the United States is hoping to create a momentum and a space where US companies and US can really get access directly from some get access to some natural resources from the DRC and from Zambia, especially now since you have an American company, Cobalt, that's investing also in a mine in Zambia, where they found a very interesting copper deposit. They're gonna confirm the number later to determine whether or not they're going to invest in that project. But they're quite hopeful on what they found there. So when you have that in mind, you understand that on the west coast, on the Atlantic side, you have the Lobito corridor and the Benguela Railway. Interesting fact: the Benguela Railway was revamped and modernized by China in 2013 for $1.8 billion. So it was it was revamped in 2013, and later on in 2021 there was a tender by the Angolan government to open up on any company that's interested into taking the concession of that Lobito railway, Benguela Railway. Basically, due to China's influence in the country in Angola, everyone was expecting the consortium CITIC, the Chinese consortium CITIC, where you find China Railway, that's going to win the concession. But surprisingly, they did not win that concession. It was the Trafigura consortium led by Trafigura, where you find Trafigura, Montaengil from Portugal, and Ventus from Belgium, that won the concession for the Benguela Railroad. So that, needless to say, that was a quite serious setback for China, since China has invested a lot in that railway. So seeing China losing that was quite something surprising for many observers that have been following what China does, the Chinese influence in Angola and in that part of the world. So that takes us back into the TAZARA railway. So here we have the TAZARA railway that's now connects Zambia, Tanzania to the Dar es Salaam port in Tanzania. China, for many years, Zambia and Tanzania have been wanting China to invest in that railway. They were expecting that, since it was a aid project before, China is also going to extend financing support, even maybe loan, to revamp and modernize the railway. But we've told you that China has moved away from extending financing, extending loans to to the scale of billion. Now China is changing. In that change, we've seen that China is now moving toward what we call the smart and beautiful, small and beautiful, and it's doing that in a different way. In this case here, in this case, we have China using a private public partnership as a way to to as a way to kind of balance I'd say, to balance the risk, to mitigate the risk between itself, China, the Zambian government, and the Tanzania government. What was interesting during before that process, that China has sent a team down in Zambia and Tanzania during in last year, November and December, to survey the project, to do a due diligence, and to make sure that the project is economically viable and is profitable, because China doesn't want to invest anymore in a project where there's no money that's to be made, and that's to be made at the end. And plus, by doing a PPP approach, China is also winning a concession contract on that. So it's not making the same mistake that it's made before on the Benguela railway, where it's revamped it modernized it, but 8 years down the line, it could not win the concession contract. Here in the Tazara, it's managing, it's doing it in a way that I'm financing, I'm going to be building, and when they say financing, we still have to see the details on how much is going to finance, but they're going to finance it. We're going to build it, we're going to modernize it, but we also going to have the concession contract. We don't have the details yet, but if we have to see if we have to project, based on based on the situation, we can project that they can have between a 20 and 30 years concession contract. That contract is likely to be, let's say, a BOT contract, build to operate. They're going to build, to operate it, and they're going to transfer it in a way that they build. They for quite some time, they're going to manage it for 30 years, 20 or 30 years, we don't know yet, and later on to transfer it to both Tanzania and Zambia. That way, it's going to allow it's going to make sure that it's managed well, first of all, and the railway is economically viable and profitable. That's why China is guaranteed, is making sure to take back its money that it invested in that project. This is the one of the key parts, where when we talk about smart and beautiful, is the fact that the project needs to be profitable and economically viable. And of course, by with a PPP approach, Chinese make sure to mitigate the risk between itself, Zambia, and Tanzania. So we have that approach, and the background motivation is the geopolitical situation of all that of all the context that we do have here. We do have the US and the Europe trying to get access in the supply chain of critical minerals in both DRC, Zambia, and Angola. They're developing a new project, this Lobito Railway here, where they're trying to, they're trying to reduce China's influence. And China now, being aware of the situation, understood that it cannot allow itself to lose the control and the access of the other important railway that connects Zambia to the east coast toward the Indian Ocean. So when you put all those elements in context, when you put all those elements together, the context about the geopolitical of it and the economic approach on why and how China is moving toward that project, you kind of now understand why China is interested in the Tazara railway. I do hope that those explanations helped you to quite understand the context and why China is moving into that space, and why it's not a sign that China is back into lending. It's lending billions of dollars, but it's a sign that China is still interested into investing in an infrastructure project in Africa, but it's doing it in a smart and a very different way now. The PPP, private public partnership, seems to be the way China has chosen now to make sure to remain relevant into the financing part, into the infrastructure project in Africa, financing it to make sure to also mitigate the debt risk that it can find itself with different country, but also to make sure that it's the money it invested into the project are paid back in due time. We've seen that as well in Kenya with the Nairobi Express Railway, where it's also a PPP with a Chinese company for 25 years. So we also see that here in the Tazara Railway. We're gonna have to see what the decision is going to be taken by the three governments, Zambia, Tanzania, and China. And we're gonna also have to see the details of the contract, because it's in those details we are going to understand much better what burden China is going to take, what responsibility Zambia or Tanzania are going to take into the project, and what are the details, what are the financing details. But it's quite interesting to see how that investment, that project is going to move forward. So this was my quick take on the Tazara Railway and China involvement in that project. I hope that you can understand you kind of understand why China is doing what it's doing in that project. See you next week for another quick take on a different topic of China in the global south.